that anger. For example, you said
Sure.
Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage.
Well, as I say in an article entitled, "Here's a list of all the giant, bad, dumb things I've ever said."
Was that dumb?
This clip is from 2019, and I am bringing it back in 2026 because it has never been more relevant than it is right now. Back in 2019, Ben Shapiro sat down with Andrew Neil of the BBC and got completely destroyed by his own words. But here is why this matters today. In 2026, Ben Shapiro is still doing the exact same thing he did in that interview. He is still using the Israel debate to silence anyone who disagrees with him. He is still calling critics anti-Semites instead of engaging their arguments. He is still refusing to debate people who are actually prepared. Dave Smith, Piers Morgan, anyone with receipts. And he is still rage quitting the moment someone holds him accountable. The difference is that in 2026, we are in the middle of an active war in Iran, a war that Ben Shapiro has been one of the loudest cheerleaders for. A war launched without congressional authorization. A war with no exit plan. A war that has the Strait of Hormuz closed, oil prices at a 3-year high, and American soldiers in harm's way. And the man who built his brand on facts, don't care about your feelings, has had remarkably few facts to offer about any of it. So before we get into the current chapter of Ben Shapiro's story, it is worth going back to the beginning. Because this interview from 2019 is the blueprint for everything he has done since. I'm Justin, this is Justin Speaks. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay locked in because the full breakdown is at the end and it connects the past directly to what is happening right now.
Ben Shapiro, you're followed by millions of people online and on social media. You're one of the biggest names in American conservatism. What is it you think you're tapping into?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things. One, there is actually a hunger for different ideas. The monolithic nature of the United States media is pretty evident in terms of its politics. People tend to agree on essentially the liberal point of view and increasingly a radical leftist point of view in the media. And obviously, I speak in response to that. At the same time, I try to provide an honest take on the issues of the day, and that means that I am not beholden to the Republican Party, for example. It means that I am going to speak out whenever I think that a principle is being violated, just no matter who is doing the violation.
You worked for the right-wing Breitbart website, but you left over its support for Donald Trump. And I think you said you'd never vote for Mr. Trump. Why is that?
Well, in 2016, the Breitbart made a hard turn in favor of one particular candidate, and that's their prerogative. Lots of publications have an editorial point of view, and Breitbart was one of those. The reason that I left Breitbart specifically was because of an incident in which a Breitbart reporter, a female reporter, was grabbed on the arm by Corey Lewandowski, then the campaign manager for President Trump, and was bruised on the arm, and then Corey Lewandowski proceeded to lie about it, and Breitbart proceeded to throw its own reporter under the bus, suggest that she was lying or making this up. And at that point, I determined that I could no longer work for a publication that wasn't even willing to stand up for its own reporters and instead would throw those reporters under the bus in favor of a candidate that it sought to back.
Haven't you lost your battle for the Republican Party, though? Isn't the Republican Party now the party of Trump?
No, I mean, I think that the Republican Party is always the party of whomever is the president, technically speaking. But in terms of who are the sort of the thought leaders inside the conservative movement, who are the people who are driving a lot of the discussion inside the conservative movement, I don't think that's correct at all. I think that most Republicans see President Trump as a vehicle for their policy preferences, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with all of his personal foibles or the way that he behaves or the things that he says. And I think a lot of Republicans respond in anger to the media attacking President Trump, mainly out of a reactionary and half-appropriate upset that the media seem to have a double standard when it comes to covering certain politicians.
I'm interested that you think there's a thought movement inside the Republican Party. I mean, haven't the conservatives run out of ideas in America? All the new policies, the Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, the Green New Deal, they're all coming from the left, and they're popular.
Well, frankly, I'm confused by the idea that any of those are particularly new ideas. I mean, most of those ideas have been around since Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the very earliest, or at the very latest, rather. Some of them go all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. But the idea that new ideas are absent in the Republican Party is obviously untrue. We have a very strong debate that goes on inside sort of the conservative halls of intelligentsia about what is the appropriate action to take with regard to the medical system. Should global warming be considered a real threat, or should global warming be considered something that technology will solve? And if so, what are the best best aspect of solving that. Now, there's a rich intellectual debate on the right about nationalism versus patriotism, for example, or populism versus free marketeerism. That debate is happening on the right to sort of suggest that the right in America is bereft of ideas, but the left is full of ideas. Number one, not all ideas are good ideas. I mean, AOC is pretty good evidence of that. I'm a big fan of some old ideas myself that I think are pretty good. But beyond that, I think that it is intellectual sneering of the highest order to suggest that only the left has new and decent ideas.
Some of the ideas that are popular in your side of politics would seem to take us back to the Dark Ages, Georgia, new abortion laws, which you are much in favor of, that a woman who miscarries could get 30 years. A Georgian woman who travels to another state for an abortion procedure could get 10 years. These are extreme hard policies.
Well, okay, a couple of things. One, I'm not sure. I mean, frankly, I don't know whether are you an objective journalist or are you an opinion journalist?
I'm a journalist that asks questions.
Okay, so you're a supposedly objective journalist calling policies with which you disagree barbaric and suggesting only one side of the political aisle has ideas. So I just want to point out that I wish you would at least be honest in your own biases.
Mr. Shapiro, I know that broadcasting in America is now so polarized that on one program you only have the left and another one you just have the right. My job is to question those who have strong views and put an alternative to them. If you were an anti-abortion person, I would be putting pro-abortion questions to you. But you are
really would you call the pro-choice position?
So why don't you just answer my question,
sir? I'm happy to answer your question. Please answer this one. Would you suggest that a late-term abortion is brutal?
I'm not taking a view on this issue. I'm asking you the questions.
Sir, you just suggested that the pro-life position is inherently brutal and terrible, so I'm asking you, as an objective journalist, would you ask the same question to a pro-choice advocate by calling their position brutal and horrible?
What I'm asking you is that why is it that a bill banning abortions after a woman has been pregnant for 6 weeks is not a return to the Dark Ages? What's your answer?
My answer is something called science. Human life exists at conception. It ought to be protected. Now, back to my question to you. You purport to be an objective journalist. BBC purports to be an objective down-the-middle network. It obviously is not. It never has been. And you as a journalist are proceeding to call one side of the political aisle ignorant, barbaric, and sending us back to the Dark Ages. Why don't you just say that you're on the left? Is this so hard for you? Why can't you just be honest?
Mr.
Seriously,
Shapiro,
it's a serious question.
Mr. Shapiro, if you only knew how ridiculous that statement is, you wouldn't have said it. So let's move on. Would you vote for Mr. Trump? I
think it's pretty evident from your own questions exactly what you are, sir.
Would you vote for Mr. Trump in 2020?
I'd certainly consider voting for Mr. Trump in 2020, just like I'd consider voting for anybody else in 2020.
But didn't you once say that you'd never vote for him?
I said that I wouldn't vote for him in 2016. And then I wrote a column for National Review explaining the conditions under which I might change my mind.
You're a culture war warrior. Isn't he largely on your side? You wrote once it was unlikely he'd appoint conservative judges to the Supreme Court. He has.
Right.
So you were wrong.
I like many of President Trump's policies, even if I still have serious reservations about his personality and character.
Do you think there's a Democrat that could beat him in 2020?
Sure, I think there are several Democrats who could beat him in 2020.
Who would have the best chance?
I think that Joe Biden is likeliest to beat him, considering that he has significant appeal in a lot of the Rust Belt, in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, the places that President Trump needs to win to retain the presidency. And Joe Biden also has a long history in politics, which means that the American people already have sort of a preconceived vision of him. President Trump, as a campaigner, is very good at dragging unknowns through the mud or at exposing details about people that are previously sort of covered up. But when it comes to Joe Biden, he's been well exposed for a very long time. Most people know him, and he's not nearly as unpopular even going in as Hillary Clinton was in 2016.
So if it was a close race between Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump, you would, from what you say, I think, probably go for Mr. Trump.
Yes, I would vote for Mr. Trump if it were a race between Biden and Trump, because I think that the damage that President Trump has done to the country on a character and rhetorical level has already been done and cannot be undone. I don't see it as getting worse day by day. That is the new status quo, unfortunately. Now the question becomes which policies I would most like to see enacted, and Trump's policy preferences are closer to my own than Joe Biden's are.
Now, you're a star of new media, of conservative new media. You and others on the left and the right, you position yourselves as supposed tellers of hard truths. But haven't you all just really coarsened public discourse in America and exacerbated its divisions?
You know, it's kind of odd to be hearing about me coarsening public discourse when you call policies you disagree with brutal and bringing us back to the Dark Ages, sir.
The point, I don't want to return to it, but the point was to put a position for you to reply to it. And I thought we'd covered that.
That's...
Well, I'll put some of the points too, because on your
Your
videos,
characterization of issues is part of the problem in the coarsening of public debate.
Well, maybe it's also part of your problem too, because we have from your YouTube videos, Ben Shapiro destroys the abortion argument. Ben Shapiro destroys transgenderism and abortion. Is that not a kind of coarse public discourse?
Well, are those videos labeled by me?
I have no idea. But
Why are you picking out? Why are you? I have a question. Why are you picking out random YouTube videos put up by people who are not me?
Are you
and then attributing the titles to me?
Are you unhappy with the way they've been described?
I think that people can describe me however they please. It's a free country, and I'm all in favor of a public debate. If you watch the actual clips, they are generally civil conversations between me and somebody who disagrees with me.
You say in your new book, you suggest that America's largest struggle at the moment is, quote, the struggle for our national soul. We are so angry at each other right now. And I think that's true. I've just returned from the United States. But aren't you part of the problem with the way you go about your discourse, not the solution?
I think we can all do better in our discourse, but the fact that I've reached out to so many people across the aisle to have conversations with them is pretty evident. The fact that I was willing to walk from a publication that was paying me money over principle is pretty evident. The fact that I've called out President Trump, a member of a party of which I am a member, repeatedly when I think that he has done things that are immoral, I think is decent evidence that I'm looking at least for a civil conversation.
Well, as you say in your book, you say that there's quite a key phrase, we are so angry at each other right now. But as I say, aren't you part of that anger? Aren't you encouraging that anger? For example, you described Mr. Obama's State of the Union address in 2012 as fascist mentality in action.
Well, I think that if you want to argue with the characterization, then we can talk about what exactly his State of the Union address said. Is it charged language in politics? Sure. The problem that I have is not with charged language in politics, which I'm generally in favor of. I like a robust public debate and a very loud and spirited public debate. I have no problem with that whatsoever. What I'm talking about is the assumption that people with whom we disagree politically are inherently of bad character or, in your words, want to bring us back to the Dark Ages.
But again, it was your description of the State of the Union address in 2012 as fascist.
The wording of President Trump's 2012 address was bad and wrong.
There are plenty of things that are bad and wrong, but it doesn't make them fascist.
Well, I suppose that's true. But if you would like to, again, if you'd like to read me the column out loud, I suppose I can critique it for you.
Oh, well, again, with Mr. Obama, you said, and you're Jewish yourself. I only mention that because to put this in context. The Jews who vote for Obama are, by and large, Jews in name only. Ginos, you call them.
My statement was based on the fact that Jews in the United States, as an ethnic group, are largely irreligious, which is true by every single poll. Jews are the most irreligious group in the United States. As an Orthodox Jew who actually takes Judaism seriously, the point that I am making is that most Jews who are ethnically Jewish are not religiously Jewish in any context.
No. The point you were making is that Jews who vote for Obama are Jews in name only.
I said that, yes, that is correct, that Jews who voted for Barack Obama, a progenitor of the Iran deal, a person who was cracking down on religious liberty, a person who spent much of his career as president of the United States attempting to deprive Israel of the necessities to defend itself, that people, Jews who voted for President Obama, by and large, cared about Judaism far less than they did about other priorities.
Did you say they should turn their badge in as a Jew?
Yes, I believe that if you are somebody who takes Judaism seriously, that comes along with ideological commitment.
I mean, I guess.
Also, I hope you're having fun, by the way, going through every old tweet that I've ever sent to try and do gotcha questions. But if you'd like to have a discussion about my general philosophy or things I've done in, say, I don't know, that's 2012, so it's now 2019. If you'd like to discuss something I've done in, say, like the past 5 years, why don't we do that? How about that?
Because your book is a criticism of how angry America is and how America has to do better. And I'm simply
I have an entire list on my website, sir. On my list, I have an entire website of dumb, bad things that I've said.
I'm simply trying to point out some of the things you've said that seem to me to help to stoke that anger. For example, you said Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage.
Well, as I say in an article entitled Here's a list of all the giant, bad, dumb things I've ever said.
Was that
list
dumb?
Well, yes, that's a dumb tweet. And not only, but it is also important to mention that the next few tweets clarify that that tweet is specifically referring to the Hamas leadership, which, by the way, a BBC I've seen is relatively reticent to condemn.
No, actually, it wasn't. What you went on to do and say, you are correct about the slur on Arabs. It's not all Arabs that want to live in open sewage and blow things up. It's just Palestinians, you went on to say.
No, it says the ones who take sides against Israel in the Israel-Palestinian
Arab population is rotten to the core, you went on to say. Not Hamas, the Palestinian Arab population.
I say that by poll numbers, they elected Hamas. They elected Hamas. They educate their children in school that Israel should be obliterated, sir.
I guess.
If you want to read, honestly, this is a giant waste of time in the sense that the entire interview is designed for you to shout slogans or old things that I've said at me. I don't see how this forwards the debate. You talk about undermining the public discourse. It seems to me that simply going through and finding lone things that sound bad out of context and then hitting people with them is a way for you to make a quick buck on BBC off the fact that I'm popular and no one has ever heard of you.
There are not many bucks to be made on the BBC, unlike American broadcasting, Mr. Shapiro. The point I'm trying to make is that your words are hardly designed to produce the consensus and understanding that the book seems to want to produce. That's my point, that you write about, Judeo-Christian culture and so on, but so much of what you've said in the past would seem to turn its back on Judeo-Christian culture.
You're lecturing me on Judeo-Christian culture after you call the pro-life position barbaric?
I just asked you a question.
And I asked you a question. You failed to answer a single one of mine. Frankly, I find this whole thing a waste of time. If you want to read the book and critique the book, why don't you read and critique the book? If you want to critique me, you can think whatever you want of me.
Why don't you
frankly,
just try and
I don't care. I don't frankly give a damn what you think of me since I've never heard of you.
And I've never heard of you until I briefed myself for this. But that's not the issue. You have a new book out.
Then why the hell are you interviewing me, sir?
It's an interesting book. But my point is, your book claims that society...
Well, it'd be nice if you would quote it from time to time.
Your book is... Well, actually, I've done so several times, and I'm about to do so again, if you would let me just finish the question. Your book claims that society is turning its back on Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah,
what are those values? What are the values it's turning its back on?
I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer. So I think we're done here. I appreciate your time, sir.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and for showing that anger is not part of American political discourse. Now, Mr. Shapiro, we'll say goodbye.
Let me tell you why this clip matters right now. Not as a history lesson, not as a throwback, but as a live document of a pattern that has never stopped. Everything you just watched Ben Shapiro do in that interview, the deflection, the flip, the personal attack, the rage quit, he is still doing all of it today. The names have changed, the topics have shifted, but the mechanics are identical. And understanding what happened in that BBC studio with Andrew Neil is the key to understanding everything Ben Shapiro has done since. Start with the most important thing Andrew Neil did that Ben could not handle. He came prepared. He did not come with opinions. He did not come with talking points. He came with Ben Shapiro's own words printed out and ready to read back to him one by one. And Ben Shapiro, the man who has made a career out of doing exactly that to other people, completely fell apart the moment it was done to him. That tells you everything you need to know about the difference between performing intellectual courage and actually having it. Ben Shapiro performs it spectacularly when he controls the environment. When someone else controls the environment, he rage quits and tells a veteran journalist he has never heard of him. The bias accusation strategy is the one that needs to be named and dismantled because it is still the first weapon Ben reaches for in every debate he cannot win on substance. The moment Andrew Neil asked him to defend the Georgia abortion laws, Ben did not defend them. He demanded to know whether Neil was an objective journalist. He accused the BBC of institutional left-wing bias. He tried to turn the interview into a debate about the interview itself, rather than the actual questions being asked. Think about what that move is designed to do. If you can convince the audience that the person asking the questions is biased, then you never have to answer the questions. The bias accusation is not a defense of a position. It is a way of making the position unreachable. And Ben Shapiro has been running this exact play for years. We see it today whenever anyone criticizes the Iran war. Suddenly, they are spreading jihadi propaganda. Suddenly, they are anti-American. Suddenly, the problem is not the argument they are making, but the motivation they must have for making it. It is the same deflection. It is the same refusal to engage. It is the same intellectual cowardice wrapped in the same confident packaging. The Gino comment, Jews in name only, is the one that connects most directly to everything Ben Shapiro has been doing in the years since this interview. He told Jewish Americans who voted for Barack Obama they should turn in their badge as a Jew. He decided that political alignment with Israel's government is the measure of authentic Jewish identity. And when Andrew Neil read that back to him, he could not defend it, so he called it a gotcha. Fast forward to today, and Ben Shapiro is using the exact same framework on a much larger scale. Now it is not just Jewish Democrats who are insufficiently Jewish. Now it is anyone, Jewish or not, who criticizes the Israeli government's conduct in Gaza or questions the Iran war. They are anti-Semites. They are terror apologists. They are spreading jihadi propaganda. Piers Morgan got that label the moment he became critical of Israeli government policy. Dave Smith gets it every time he raises questions about American foreign policy in the Middle East. Mehdi Hasan has been called it repeatedly. The label has become so broad and so detached from its actual meaning that it now functions as a catch-all dismissal for anyone who disagrees with Ben Shapiro on one specific topic. And that is not a defense of Jewish people. That is the weaponization of anti-Semitism as a rhetorical shield for a government's military conduct. The hypocrisy on coarsening public discourse is the one that made me want to pull up this clip in the first place, because it is so perfectly relevant to where we are right now. Ben Shapiro sat in that interview and complained that political media was making America angrier and more divided. He wrote a book about it. He called it a struggle for the national soul. And Andrew Neil correctly pointed out that the man writing that book was the same man producing content with titles like Ben Shapiro Destroys and running a media empire built entirely on the language of combat, defeat, and enemies. Ben had no answer for that. He pivoted to asking whether the titles were technically his. And now in the current political moment, that same media empire is one of the loudest voices cheerleading a war in Iran. A war that has divided this country more sharply than almost anything in recent memory. A war that has fractured the Republican coalition, with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Carrie Prejean all publicly breaking from the administration over it. A war that has produced historically low approval ratings. A war with no defined goal, no exit plan, and a Secretary of War who described it as ordained by God. And Ben Shapiro, the man who wrote a book about America's angry national soul, who is providing the ideological cover for all of it. The man who complained about coarsening discourse is calling every critic of this war a jihadist sympathizer. The man who said he spoke out against principles being violated, regardless of who violated them, will not say a single critical word about an unauthorized war launched without congressional debate. The contradiction is not subtle. It is the entire story. The rage quit is the moment that stays with you because it is so perfectly revealing. Not because it is funny, though it is, but because of what it tells you about the limits of the performance. Ben Shapiro can talk faster than almost anyone. He can pivot, deflect, reframe, and attack better than almost any political commentator working today. But when someone sits across from him with his own words and refuses to let him redirect, he quits. He declared the interview a waste of time. He said he didn't give a damn what Andrew Neil thought of him. He said he had never heard of him until briefing himself for this. And he left. That is the tell. Because a person who genuinely has intellectual courage does not leave when the questions get hard. A person who genuinely believes their positions can withstand scrutiny does not need to end the conversation when the scrutiny arrives. The rage quit is not anger. It is the sound of a carefully constructed persona encountering its own limits. And we have seen that same sound since, in the refusal to debate Dave Smith, in the stopped replies to Piers Morgan, in the anti-Semitism accusations deployed the moment the Israel questions become too specific to deflect. Different formats, same instinct. Run from accountability, call it principle. Here is why all of this matters for where we are right now in 2026. We are living through one of the most consequential foreign policy moments in American history. An unauthorized war, a closed strait, gas prices spiking, American soldiers in harm's way. a president who described the operation as a little excursion, a secretary of war who said it was ordained by God, an intelligence director whose own written testimony contradicted the stated justification for the conflict. And in the middle of all of that, the most influential voice in conservative media, the man with the biggest platform, the biggest audience, and the most resources, is using every tool in his arsenal to make sure the questions that need to be asked do not get asked. Not by engaging those questions and answering them, but by attacking the people asking them, by calling them anti-Semites, by calling them jihadist sympathizers, by labeling them as America haters, by doing in 2026 exactly what he did in that BBC studio. Deflect, attack the questioner, refuse to answer, leave when it gets too hot. Andrew Neil exposed that pattern years ago. It is still the pattern today, and this channel, Justin Speaks, exists precisely because someone has to keep pointing at it every single time it repeats. Because the stakes of letting it go unchallenged are not abstract anymore. They are measured in closed trade routes and spiked grocery bills and soldiers whose families do not know if they are coming home. Like this video. Share it with someone who still thinks Ben Shapiro is a truth teller. Subscribe to Justin Speaks and come back because we are going to keep connecting these dots.